Did you hear that?
I do.
Did it say that to you too?
Yeah, I get a little pop-up on the screen.
Oh, really? That's the freakiest. I've never done this before. I didn't know it would do that. Hey, cat, who's that?
That's baby.
Baby?
Yeah.
She a rescue?
Oh, they're all rescues. Yeah, but
all of them. How many?
I'd rather not say.
You not the shot caller on that one?
No. Nope.
So that's baby. Where did baby come from?
She's a big baby. Well, Tiv actually walked into a relative's house, and she was a kitten, and she saw the cat getting kicked down the stairs, and so she picked it up, put it in her hoodie pocket, and it was hers.
Kicked?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. That's not the one you were telling me about that had like no skin for a while, right?
No, that was probably Mita. She was in much worse condition. She was like out there in the middle of nowhere. She was not going to make it that much longer.
Yeah.
But
hey,
yeah,
baby.
no, baby's to the window, jumped down in there to eat, and because that's where I keep the food, and jumped back. She probably jumped on the mini fridge into the opening and then
baby got
back out
hops.
here. Yeah, no, she does, and like Mita does as well. They're ridiculous. Like you wouldn't expect it out of those things. They're frumpy sons of bitches.
What I don't like about cats is how they're nocturnal. Because I'm trying to sleep and then they're loud as hell. I don't know how you deal with that.
By sequestering all of their obnoxious toys once it gets dark.
Fair enough.
That's and they're partially nocturnal, but they're awake during the day too. Like they basically go, like they operate in 6 to 8 hour cycles, I've observed. And man, I'm gonna come across as a fucking cat freak on this YouTube video.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
okay. I think it's fair to
me,
point out, as you said earlier, that this was not your choice, these cats. This was forced upon you. You've just adopted an affection for the living animal that lives in your house.
The several living animals.
And it's also important to mention that Eric Mikols has a pit bull. So it's not just cats in the house.
And not just that. Friends with the 3 Rottweilers next door. They love me.
Right.
They eat out of my hand.
Right.
They're big dogs.
Right. Eric's just an animal dude.
All shapes, sizes, colors, species.
Not a cat freak. Just conveying that message to the public.
Setting the record straight.
Setting it straight as can be.
Anything else you hear is fake news.
Right. We don't need that on a political campaign about 20 years from now. Candidate Eric Mikols, cat freak.
Joe Biden's getting a cat, and he's bringing his 2 shepherds into the house. You know what we shouldn't have trusted Trump to begin with. He didn't have a White House pet. Every president has had a White House pet, except this guy.
Kind of a psychopath move.
Yeah, no, now when we're guessing why he shredded every environmental and conservation, and undermined the Endangered Species Act every opportunity he got, no longer surprised, because he just doesn't give a shit.
We're getting some feedback, by the way. I don't know if it's hitting it again.
Yep.
Probably going to be hanging out the whole time, huh?
She'll eventually get the message. You just gotta gently put her down 3 or 4 times. Like all the bar examiners have been introduced to this cat because it would be strange to be picking something up or something's obviously bugging me from the outside. So I got to put the cat in the camera and just be like, that's all this was.
How'd that go?
Not cheating.
How'd the bar go?
Well, it was novel. It's never been held remotely before, so I guess we were the guinea pigs in that situation.
Yeah, I guess so. You were talking about how you were nervous about them not being able to properly observe people if they were being and, holding their integrity or not.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that they did a pretty good job taking care of those concerns, because they don't have people actually proctoring you. They have the software it gets into you let it into your webcam, and it takes 90-minute videos of you, and after you submit your exam, the AI runs through it and flags irregularities, and after it
Crazy
runs those flags, then they sit down, have a human review that, and they can be
so
like, no,
what would they consider an irregularity? Like talking to someone while you're
well, that would be a big irregularity,
yeah.
but the AI would flag something like a siren goes past your house, or in my situation, the upstairs neighbors were screaming at each other. Cats, that kind of thing, stuff that you wouldn't
you sound like you didn't have the best setting for this test.
Nah, not really, but I took the test with thousands of other people who had to take the test under the conditions that they had available to them. So I'm sure that I didn't have the worst situation. I heard that one woman actually gave birth during the first part of the test, or no, she didn't give. She went into labor during the first part of the test, and then was able to finish her part.
It's still crazy.
To finish the exam, go to the hospital, give birth, and then she took the second part of the exam the next day.
So like her water broke and she just kept writing?
Yeah. Well, because she was afraid that they would disqualify her. She left the view of the camera, because that's really how they made it sound.
Damn, she's dedicated.
Yeah.
So what was the toughest part?
I mean, it's tough to say. They break it into 3 sections. You take multiple choice on day 2. And then the first day is broken into, in this exam, 3 short answer essays, and then 1, what they call an MPT, which is where they give you a file of make-believe facts and laws and court cases that are made up, and you're given an assignment from an imaginary attorney supervisor, and you have to churn out an assignment in 90 minutes. And that one is probably the most challenging. It's weighed the least, about 20%. And that was probably what I struggled with.
Have you gotten your results back yet? Did you pass?
I don't know. They gave themselves until Christmas, even though we took the test the first week of October. But I haven't seen anything yet.
Do you think you passed?
Hope so.
I think you did.
Yeah, worked my tail off, and
yeah, you were telling me. So we got Eric Jeffrey Mikols part 2 in the flesh, well, in the camera. Yeah, how are you guys doing? Did you guys get tested?
I didn't get tested. She got tested, and her test came back negative. So
you're all good.
Well, so far the rapid tests aren't guaranteed to be spot on, so they also get a PCR out of that swab, which comes back a couple days later. And
there's a couple different ways. Did you hear about this new method that they're pushing out where you spit in a tube and then you mail it in?
I saw something along those lines. I didn't look into it that much because I'm not considering that.
Yeah, I'm not a medical professional. That doesn't sound accurate to me.
I mean, it's not that it would be necessarily inaccurate. It's just gross. Like how, like you're gonna trust everybody to spit into the tube and not get any on the outsides? I don't know what sort of process that they might run them through. I know that a lot of
if they got to stick something all the way up your nose to get an accurate reading, I don't understand how you just spitting couldn't they just swab the back of your throat? I don't understand how that works.
Well, because I mean, I don't understand. I'm not a medical professional. I don't know exactly how it works either. But my understanding is that it's a little less invasive to go through the nose. And also because the virus is mostly transmitted through airborne particulates. that are trapped in water droplets, they don't really want people opening their mouths in in the
Gotcha.
faces of
That makes
all of the
sense. So
people
you
who
can
are
keep, yeah.
trying to take the swabs. So
That makes a lot of sense now, actually. Well, I hope you guys end up being okay. Maybe we can get another one in person before I ship off. Because I found out that I'm going to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for 4.5 months for training. And then my first duty station is Fort Bliss, Texas. So I'll be heading down there and be moved in El Paso around June. So hopefully before I leave in the beginning of January, I can get back out there. We can hopefully do a part 2 to this, because we have a pretty big beast of a topic tonight.
Yeah, I'll say. Yeah, no, I got the map to my right, and so from time to time I will try to maneuver the camera as possible.
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So there we are.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, why don't you keep that stationary? I'll put something up for when I edit. I'll put like a map in the background, so we'll keep the camera stationary, just for visual quality purposes.
Of course.
One more thing I want to get into before we start talking about China, the election, because the last time I was over at your place, it was like September.
Yeah, no, it's been a little bit.
What is going on?
I mean, I want to say hard to say, but it's really straightforward. Every election official, be it a local election official, county level, state level, all the way up through the federal government, the chief of Cyber Command for the Trump administration said that they unanimously said that this was the safest, most secure election that has ever been held in American history. And while we were all looking for external interference, like was the case in 2016,
yeah.
This year, all of the misinformation came directly from the White House.
And I feel like every year there's a certain percent, definitely below 1, that's fraudulent. I think that, President Trump right now is just trying to shine light on the smallest speck of dust he possibly can, because there's always fraud as long as we've had elections. But is that number in any way significant? I don't think so. That's just my opinion.
Well, that's the consensus. There were roughly 160 million Americans who voted, which is far more than half of the legal voting population. And when you have that many voters, odds are that you're going to get at least one who did so illegally.
It's just going to be a dick.
So,
yeah. Right.
And especially with the additional ways that we were given to vote, or those ways that had been in place in the past but were expanded due to pandemic considerations, are those numbers are probably going to tick up a little bit, but there are also a ton of procedures in place to catch those irregularities.
I see this as a win for America, because we have never had this many people in our history come out to vote.
That's a fact. Yeah.
And put the numbers Trump got against any other candidate in history, he would have won.
Yeah.
The votes that Trump got alone. I'm not talking about Biden's votes.
Right.
So I think people are understanding the importance of voting, which is a big part of our democracy, which I see as a win for the U.S., regardless of who won. I'm Team USA. I'm not red or blue. So I see it as a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that portion is certainly encouraging, and people on both sides felt that this was an existential election, and that if their candidate lost, it was going to be trouble and turmoil for the country going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into this when we start talking about China. I just hope that, President Biden's diplomacy when it comes to, the Asian Pacific, the Middle East, Africa, I hope that that all lives up to par to the things he's been saying in his press conferences.
Well, his team certainly will give a lot of hope for that. Antony Blinken is a career diplomat. He was actually spent time overseas growing up. Was always at least interested in world affairs. If you really want to, I guess, get to know the candidate before he was Biden's Secretary of State candidate, there's a 2017 podcast episode on the Axe Files, which is hosted with David Axelrod, where Antony Blinken comes in and he, discusses the state of world affairs as they were in, I want to say, June of 2017. And so this is before Biden was even considering entering the presidential race, and now the man is Secretary of State. So if you want to know like how he thinks as an individual, like what his personal convictions are, that would be a good way to do it. So, and what he is he's, like I said, he's a career diplomat, believes in American leadership, and will start the Biden administration by going back over to Europe and shoring up all of our ties. Like that is going to be priority number one, because that is one of the...
I'm excited to see it, and I'm rooting for it, because I think the most toxic thing that's out there is when your candidate doesn't win and you root against the US doing well. Yeah, because you hate that candidate.
Yeah, like even when Trump got elected, there was a significant, like a majority of Democrats who just don't want the pilot of their plane to crash. So once the results are certified, most people are going to accept those results.
Of course. And I mean, I'm moderate, but I lean a little bit to the right, and I am rooting for Joe Biden all the way. I mean, like I said, I'm Team USA.
Joe Biden's moderate as well, just leans a little bit to the left.
Exactly. So we're talking about China tonight. And from what the articles you sent me and my own personal research, I gather the idea that we're focusing on the violation of human rights and using that as a way to propel the Chinese Communist Party's agenda.
Yeah. I would say, personally, that's going to be the issue that is most urgent to deal with. China is really on a meteoric rise, and most of that has been facilitated through decades of policy since China officially opened to world commerce in 1979. That Western democracies have believed that if they bring China in and get them more involved in global organizations like the World Trade Organization, for example, that China would...
Is that when we... Because I did read that article. Is that when we let them into the World Trade Organization? Was it 7
Yes. Yes. It's as far as I know.
And so if I didn't know what that was, what is it?
The World Trade Organization it's like any other international governing body. It is a creature of treaty. So if you don't recognize the authority of that organization, or you are not a part of that treaty, you're not really subject to its jurisdiction. So these types of treaties, like the Paris Climate Accord, is the same way. The International Criminal Court is the same way. The efficacy of the organization is only going to go so far as its member countries are willing to facilitate. So it's really dependent on international cooperation more than anything else. So it's kind of
rules of governance for all the countries that are involved, but there's also more opportunity for those countries that are in it.
Yeah, and it creates a table, an official table for countries to get together and try to get on the same page. The World Trade Organization governed, like it adjudicates a lot of disputes that would have to do with tariffs, trade embargoes, what is and is not legal. Like, for example, China is currently blocking Australian imports of barley. Okay. And Australia just brought a case before the World Trade Organization saying that that blockade was unlawful. And so, we'll see in the coming months whether, I guess whether the organization is going to side with China, who, is consistently increasing their portion of the global trade pie.
Yeah, there's been a little back and forth going on with Prime Minister Morrison.
Yeah, especially as of late, and that's a nice blend of economic and human rights considerations there as well. So, I mean, if that's where you'd like to start, that's as good a place as any.
Well, we got 4 major points I think we should try to hit. The first one was, correct me if I'm mispronouncing this.
Yeah.
Huawei.
Huawei.
Is that Huawei? Is that
Huawei.
the business that we have denounced in China?
Not just denounced, we've outright blocked it. That's
okay.
I mean, that's something that the Trump administration has been very forceful at pushing.
Good.
They were not the first to block Huawei. Australia was actually the first, but as time went on and President Trump intensified his trade war against the Chinese, he was more and more emphatic about his claims that Huawei's technology presented, and especially having it integrated into American 5G systems, would be a major national security risk.
What I didn't know until I read that article was that they get a lot of the chips that they need for this technology, this tech that they sell and use. They get it from us.
Yes. The American semiconductor industry is second to none.
Yeah, they get their semiconductors from us. And that blows my mind. I thought that we were getting all of our stuff from them.
We certainly do get a lot of stuff from them. And that's really reared its ugly head. And, as the pandemic has gotten worse in this country, a lot of the companies that we depend on to provide our personal protective equipment are manufactured in China, and we have no supply chains here. And so when something like that happens, the foreign sovereign is well within their authority to lock it down and cease exports, which, really could screw the countries that that depend on them.
So you said it's pronounced Huawei.
Huawei. Yeah.
Huawei. So Huawei uses these semiconductors to create certain pieces of technology that are used for things like 5G, surveillance, even like the type of stuff that we use in our phones.
Yeah.
Except they use it on a larger scale. And with these pieces of technology, they can pretty much surveil their entire population using facial recognition, the same way we unlock our phone, and they can, surveil their population. And that is the human right violation that we weren't aware of, that we became aware of. And that's why we're cutting ties with that business.
Well, yes and no. I'm certainly not an expert on that industry and the technical aspects of semiconductors and how they're used in each and every bit of technology.
And so we have stopped giving them these semiconductors, this product they need for the technology that they sell to the globe.
Yes. So there's a reason that it's called that, the upper portion of California on the coast is called Silicon Valley, because it is the most that's where our semiconductor industry developed, and where it developed faster and more efficiently than anyone else's. Now, China has a semiconductor industry, they are trying to build their own, but currently their chips that they're capable of making are approximately 40 either micrometers or
nanometers.
Nanometers.
Yeah.
Okay, is that what it is? Okay, so 40 nanometers across, while ours are hovering around 5. Now, a 40 nanometer microchip might seem small, but the only technology that could effectively power is basically a flip phone. So that makes them
That's
completely
crazy.
Dependent on
so
us.
we have a huge advantage over them when it comes to the last piece of building technology, the technology that they need. So us halting that production halts their economy.
It certainly halts that sector of it,
which is a pretty big one for them.
Yeah, well, especially as because Huawei is a huge part of their global, is President Xi's Belt and Road initiative, which
is that how you say it? Xi, President Xi.
Yeah, President Xi Jinping.
Okay, so yeah, is that his last name, President Xi?
Yes. In Chinese nomenclature, the last name is said first, followed by the first and perhaps middle. I'm not an expert on.
So what's his full name?
Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping.
Yes.
So the leader of the current leader of the Communist Party in China is Xi Jinping, President.
Yes.
Xi Jinping. Okay.
Yes.
Because I saw that name a lot in the reading, but didn't really know how to pronounce it. So they are attempting to de-Americanize their industry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're heavily dependent on China for a lot of our supply chains, but China is also heavily dependent on us for a lot of things that they can't get there to at least to satisfy the demand of the Chinese consumer. China imports a lot of soy from America. They import a lot of pork. They also import a lot of pork from Australia. That has also been reduced under the little scuffle that they've been having in recent weeks. But it's like China would like to de-Americanize their their supply chains, but they're not anywhere near doing it, or they're not anywhere near close to being able to do it.
And so I think it's important to note that Beijing, like the Communist Party in China, much like North Korea, Russia, they live off illusion to the entire globe that they are superior. This idea that they are better than they are. And so, they might be trying to say that they are successfully weaning off our supply, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that they just spent about $300 billion worth of, try and invest into a new way to, get rid of our technology and replace it with a suitable, different source.
As far as it applies to technology, that would be nearly impossible for them to do, because the amount of time that it would take for them to develop their semiconductors up to the standard where ours are would make them vulnerable to other types of technological development from other parts of the globe that has the potential to cripple their industry. And by that, I would refer to some events that have happened in Iran over the past decade or so. Like there have been some cyber attacks issued by the United States, issued by Israel, that have really crippled their nuclear programs in a lot of really important ways and set them back. And so if China is now kind of walking a tightrope where they're dependent on our semiconductor technology, but also at the same time trying to develop their own without really opening themselves up to that kind of attack.
But we're really cutting the head off the snake with this company. We've really kind of just shut off their entire industry. Imagine if they could do that to Google or Amazon. I feel like that's a worthy comparison.
Yeah, I mean, also yes and no. Huawei is more infrastructure based. a more apt comparison would be to AT&T or Verizon. They are also heavy developers of this technology, and they provide what is basically a utility that facilitates global communication. So, Google is, not only like it's American based, it's global. It's easier to cut the head off a snake that hasn't completely infiltrated your country. I know that's not
true.
a great illustration there, but
That's a good point.
Google is everywhere, and right now China has to work with Google, Facebook, other Amazon, other like technological giants, rather than preventing them from coming in. And something that's always like a good rule of thumb for global affairs: it's much easier to keep something out than to remove it once it's here.
You're getting a little feedback with your mic. Is it hitting the table?
It is. It sure is.
There we go. That's better.
Okay.
Yep. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, for I guess I don't need to come up with an example for that, but as far as Huawei is concerned, there's like I said earlier, Australia and the United States have already essentially blocked them from using their technology in those countries, but the United Kingdom has also done that. And so that's like 3 world powers that will not be using Huawei's technology. And that's going to hurt President Xi's Belt and Road
We've pretty much
Initiative
blacklisted
immensely.
this company then.
Yes, more or less.
Because of its connection to the Communist Party.
Yeah, and they have sworn up and down that they are not beholden to the Communist Party, that if the Communist Party came asking for records or access, that they would say no, that they are entirely independent. But for all I know personally, that might be true. But in the eyes of our intelligence agencies, whether they know it for sure or not, the risk is just too high. We can't. It just goes to the basic rule of thumb: easier to keep something out than to remove it once it's here. And
right.
If we were
because
to find out after the fact,
what they're doing with that technology in their country is messed up. This is what I was trying to get into earlier. They use this technology in their cameras. I'm not sure if it's exactly this, but they use a similar technology. I'm not an expert, but so in all of the cameras that they have around their country, security cameras in stores, on streets, in houses, wherever they have them, they're using facial recognition the same way you would unlock your phone, the same way that this technology knows that you are you and then permits you access into your phone. They're using the same technology to track people's whereabouts. So if a camera sees you on street A and then 20 minutes later, another camera sees you on street C, they know where you're going. And they can, they use AI and supercomputers to track your patterns, your comings and goings, who you interact with. And they can also, detect your facial expressions and choose who's happy, who's sad, who's doing. This is gross surveillance that's going on in Beijing.
China is a surveillance state, and they aren't shy about it either. The coronavirus pandemic has really given them an opportunity to make that pitch to the rest of the world that their method of eye in the sky is working, because at least as far as they've released, they have the pandemic under control. They won't let WHO officials in to confirm those assertions, and it's not all that clear that the World Health Organization would be entirely forthright if they did have such access and knowledge. But
well, Well, I think it's more important to note that they're not just using this in Beijing, they're using it in the outer parts of China that are less associated with the Communist Party and this nationalistic, ideal or ideology that's coming to light in the last few decades. They're using it in, rural areas to, surveil minorities and make sure that they're following laws and new authoritarian, police state, laws that they're putting out to control them.
Yeah. No, the universal surveillance is certainly a control mechanism, and it's something that's often discussed by journalists who go into those areas of China where it's hard enough to get as is, but while they're there, they are constantly surveilled, they're harassed, and people are following them all the time to make sure that they don't talk to people who they aren't supposed to talk to, or that people who they do talk to don't say things that the party doesn't necessarily want getting out into Western media. And it's just all part of the the oppressive surveillance state that they have going on.
As of right now, our sale of semiconductors is banned in China to Beijing. It's no longer happening because of these things that are going on.
I'm not sure if it's been eliminated completely. Huawei isn't the only game in town. It's certainly the largest and the most prolific and the most advanced, but the United States and China have very complicated trade relationships, and that has always been the most sensitive part of the back and forth that's gone on, especially over the last 4 years. You don't want to, you really can't blow things up because we are tied together in so many different ways that it would cause massive pain and damage to both economies if a clean break were to be made. So it's possible that semiconductors are being sent to, or sold to other companies, but not to Huawei. And of course, that's not something that I know, as a matter of fact, but it just demonstrates the complexity of the trade relationships that we have there.
What type of propaganda are we seeing over there? What's the message they're conveying to people in Beijing about us?
All kinds. Most of the newspapers and media organizations in China are state-run or state-affiliated that are, technically.
Global Times is an example, right? Or am I mistaken?
Yeah. No, you're spot on that one. Global Times is the most flamboyant of communist tabloids, and they're fiercely nationalistic and have been doing their part in the Communist Party's agenda to really drum up nationalism among especially among the Han ethnicity within China. And the internet and the information that they have available to them is heavily censored, and so they don't have the opportunity to check state delivered messages with other sources, and so they largely depend on various forms of social media. Weibo is the primary social media company that operates in China, and it's how a lot of Chinese nationals abroad communicate with people back home, and so that allows some outside information to get back into the stream, but there's a huge state apparatus that is constantly monitoring what goes on in those virtual universes, and is very quick to erase or censor things that they don't want getting into the mainstream.
We're getting a little bit more feedback from your mic, Eric. Is it hitting the table again?
Yeah, I guess I'll just try to put this in my ear so it can just kind of hang there. Gotta get myself a better headset.
You might want
Christmas
to.
is coming. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little loud though. I'm not sure.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it's right next to my face now. All right, Mom. Time to step up.
Put it on your wish list to Santa. Maybe he'll come through.
Right.
Yeah. Let Tiff know.
I have been recently banned from the Amazon account that we use because she has already done the Christmas shopping, I think.
She's not letting you on there.
No. I've been completely blacklisted from.
How are you going to get your stuff?
Probably the old-fashioned way.
Just go out and shop.
Just go out, throw a mask on, and buy it with, good old-fashioned paper money. Probably not paper money, but credit cards. Open. Yeah. I mean, Erie County's still on an orange zone for the time being.
So in some of the reading I was doing, I saw these videos of these Chinese soldiers, like these propaganda videos, like if war were to come, we would fight and we would win. And then at the very end, there's a video of them airstriking what appears to be Guam.
Yeah. Yep. So that touches on a number of things that we've already discussed. And the first I'll talk about is Chinese, like the bellicose rhetoric that they use to basically the image that they're trying to portray to the rest of the world. They want other countries to believe.
Hold on one second. I was wrong. It says, if war breaks out, a chorus sings, "This is my answer." So that's the correction right there. This is my answer. That's a pretty powerful message. I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you saying?
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's an important tidbit to have in there, at least. Well, and it's pretty telling as well, because it shows that while China is trying to say that they are fully equipped to defend themselves and get into a hot war with any of the world powers, they're also saying that it's not going to be us who starts it. We're not being that forthright with this, but don't mess with us at the same time. So while China is probably not quite as powerful as they are presenting, they're certainly not to be underestimated. If like the consensus, both like the internal consensus, both in the United States and in China, is that China does not yet have the military power to take the U.S. in active combat. But
I don't think anyone does.
Nobody does. No, the U.S. military might is really it's unmatched at this point, and but the encroachment of other powers, and that's been like a huge problem with the the Trump administration's foreign policy, because while his administration has built up our military, he's let foreign relations essentially go down the tube, thus increasing the chances that a war would break out. Is she gone?
Right. I was seeing that, reading this article about the propaganda that's being put out about, their ability to fight. Chinese propaganda has been accompanied by a series of military films in recent weeks, including test firing of ballistic missiles and the buzzing of Taiwan airspace. So, we're seeing pressure in Taiwan, among other places like Tibet and Mongolia and parts of China.
Yeah. I mean, Taiwan might be a good thing to get into at this point, because Taiwan is probably the touchiest subject among the many. Now,
sounds good to me.
As a backdrop, the communist revolution in China took off in the late 40s, early 50s. I want to say 1949 is the precise year that the revolution occurred. And
Korean War, right?
The Korean War was in the 50s. The Communist Revolution occurred before the Korean War. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what year that it occurred.
Right.
But Taiwan, there was another political party in China who was in power at the time, and they were essentially driven out by the Communist Party. And those individuals fled to Taiwan, and basically they developed that area, and they developed it democratically. And so all of this time, Taiwan has been treated as a separate country by many, but China sees Taiwan as part of itself.
As they do with many other areas.
As they do with many other areas, but few more strongly than they do Taiwan. Because the initial split between China and Taiwan was political rather than ethnic. And so it's like it can be argued that if China can build up enough support among the populace in Taiwan, they can put pro-Beijing lawmakers and politicians into power, and they can merge and be virtually indistinguishable. Now, really the opposite has been happening. President Tsai Ing-wen, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but she is the current president of Taiwan, and she is very anti-communist party. And so, she was democratically elected. So that just goes to show that the sentiment in Taiwan is to be separate and distinct from China, as they have been for so many years. Now, on the other hand, China has been recently emboldened, especially by its largely successful crackdown on Hong Kong, and has created fears that Taiwan will most certainly be next. If you look at pictures of the Taiwanese coast that faces Fuzhou, which is a
those concrete barriers with the spikes hanging out facing the ocean.
Yeah. Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And the Trump administration has been selling weapons to the Taiwan military.
Big time.
So our relations with Taiwan have been growing, and we've been giving them warfare strategies and recommendations on what to do with their territory.
And China has been really mad about it. Alex Azar, who is the current Health and Human Services Secretary in the Trump administration, is the first cabinet official to visit Taiwan. And I forget the gentleman's name, but there was a very high-ranking official from the State Department that visited Taiwan in recent months, who arguably the Chinese were even more upset about, because when a country's State Department visits another nation, they are essentially recognizing them as not only worth their time, but as another sovereign power. So, and that's the last thing that China wants. They virtually deny Taiwan sovereignty. And so you got two camps, the people who, are going to stand behind Taiwan and support their effort to, fully liberate themselves into a distinct and separate democracy, or those who will, play to China. And, most will kind of ignore the issue. And,
out of all the research I've done, I think the most tragic places that these things, that people are becoming oppressed and forced into this nationalistic ideology, is Tibet and what is it, Xinjiang?
Zhenjiang.
Zhenjiang.
Yeah. Yeah,
because
large province in
yeah,
northwestern China.
in Tibet, I'm sure you know this too. They're taking farmers. That's part of their culture is farming. They're
Hmm.
taking farmers, and when it once was incentive to, we're going to give you this money to sell your land, and then you can come and work in the city, where it was once incentive with payment. They are now taking the fathers of households and the men of households and relocating them,
Hmm.
making them work, and they are placing a person in their home to make sure that their family is behaving.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
mean, that is something, is that going on in Taiwan too? Because I didn't see anything about that.
No, that's not happening in Taiwan. Taiwan has all of its own, like it structures its own, like its government is independent, but the question is whether it has sovereignty distinct from China.
Right.
So lots of countries have autonomous regions where the area will govern itself with little to no interference from like the federal government in the nation in which it resides. But and Taiwan is like that in a lot of ways. They're, like I said, autonomous, self-governing, different style of government. Hong Kong is democratic, China is communist, authoritarian. But it is still not official as of yet that Taiwan has its own separate sovereign status. So no, it doesn't have complete freedom, but China is not going there, removing people and, putting its own imposters, so to speak, in place of the of the person taken. And remember that another important difference is that the like I said, the difference between China and Taiwan is political. The difference between Beijing and Tibet is ethnic. So Tibetans are not of the Han ethnic group. They
So
are
when you say the Han ethnic group, is the Communist Party descendants of that group?
Han.
I'm a little dusty on global history. I remember the Han Dynasty was huge.
Yeah, no, it certainly was very, very large, very powerful. A lot of history and culture there, but the I don't know enough to speak on exactly what distinguishes Han individuals from others that Americans would view as Asian. I simply am not informed enough on that point to speak on what distinguishes someone who's Han from somebody who is Cantonese, for example. They have different languages. The Han speak Mandarin. Those from Canton speak Cantonese. Cantonese is its own language. But yeah, the Communist Party, like President Xi himself is, of the Han ethnic group, and they have certainly shown that they believe that the Han ethnic group is superior to all others in the region. I don't think that's a very controversial
So
statement.
what are some of the ethnic groups in Tibet?
Well, Tibetans, really. They're as far as I know, that is the like what we in English refer to them as. I mean, I'm sure that there are other distinctions that they make within them, amongst themselves, and I'm sure that experts in the field would be able to very readily, make and identify those distinctions. But
Is it pronounced Uyghurs?
Uyghurs,
UIGH what?
Uyghurs.
Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities in northwestern China. So Uyghurs, are they part of Tibet? Are they a Tibetan ethnic group?
No, Uyghurs are Muslim, or largely Muslim, while Tibetans are largely Buddhist. So they're completely separate and distinct. I like from what I understand, Uyghurs have more in common with Kazakhs than they do with Tibetans. Now, like if you look at the map, Kazakhstan is the nation directly to the northeast of Xinjiang, and you know, like is the case in many countries in Europe, you know, ethnic groups aren't bound to the, you know, the countries that bear their name a lot of the time, you know. So you have a substantial Kazakh population in northwestern China who are also oppressed by the Chinese, or by the Communist Party, but you know, not to the extent that Uyghurs are suffering currently.
So I finally was able to find the part of the article that I was reading that I found so appalling. Just because, I mean, I've been reading, you know, I have like 10 of them up in my browser right now. Now, this part of the article written by Mr. Zhang, who's an expert on Chinese ethnic policies. This is, and I quote, "Now that process also works the other way around. Xinjiang's coercive labor program, which includes mandatory training for farmers and herders and centralized vocational facilities in the reassignment to state-assigned jobs, some far away, being applied to Tibet. Not to be mistaken for internment camps, though. That is a whole different element that's going on of human violation of human rights. Now, I analyzed yada yada yada. Tibetan nomads and farmers are being rounded up for military-style classes and taught work discipline, quote-unquote, gratitude for the Chinese Communist Party and Chinese language skills. They're trying to completely roll out the Tibetan language."
Yeah, that's accurate. There's there's a lot to unpack there, because arguably, you know, the Uyghurs are the ethnic group that is the worst oppressed under you know, under the regime of the Communist Party. Certainly not the longest. You know, that dubious distinction would go to the Tibetans, but currently it's estimated that there are more than 1 million Uyghurs in internment camps right now. And, you know, that's really part of like a three-prong process
Now,
that
to our knowledge,
China
are they
is trying to assimilate them with.
To our knowledge, are they dying or being killed? Is there a genocide taking place?
Or
do we just not know?
I guess according to the standards of the Hague Convention, I don't think that we have confirmed that a genocide, as it is defined by international law, has yet taken place. People are dying within those internment camps.
They're just not being killed. They're just not being cared for, basically.
Yeah, they're certainly not being cared for. In many cases, although the Communist Party has gone to great lengths to assure family members, especially family members abroad, that their loved ones are in fact being taken care of. And, you know, in that dynamic, you know, it's part carrot, part stick. You know, they'll say, you know, they'll assure them that their loved ones are being taken care of, and they will also threaten them with, you know, harm to those loved ones if they are not to stay silent.
Right, that person living in their home, well, if they're in a city they don't want to be, working a job they don't want to work, they're taking away their cultural and ethnic, you know, descendant. Their whole history is farming. It's part of their life.
Yeah, no, that's another part of the culture. I'll touch on that in a second. But like what I'm talking about is more about like Uyghurs in the United States, right? You know, who have, you know, who live in, you know, in you know, under the rules of our democracy and have the same access to the free press as everybody else. They, like, and as I said before, Weibo and WeChat are ways that the Chinese diaspora are able to communicate with individuals back home. And that it's through that medium that the Communist Party is actually threatening individuals in America from, and trying to deter them from going to the American press, because they don't, you know, they don't know what's happening to their family members.
Wait, I guess I'm
And
confused. How would they harm them in the U.S.?
they wouldn't harm them. They're threatening harm to their family members who
Back
remain in Xinjiang.
Tibet.
Yeah, who have been
Okay.
interned. So
If they don't come home, or
no,
if they
well, they're saying if they talk to the press, if
Gotcha.
they, if they raise alarms, then their family members will suffer
so
harm.
some of the ways that we're finding out about some of this, there are people are getting hurt because of it.
Yeah,
That is ridiculous.
There are people being hurt nonetheless. There's
Yeah.
just some individuals who are brave enough to
resisting military. We completely grazed over that. Military style training. Why does this sound familiar? Hold on. I gotta finish this part of it. According to a major policy paper by the Tibetan regional government, 2019-2020 Farmer and Pastoralist Training and Labor Transfer Action Plan, the military drill style skills training, coupled with what the government calls, quote unquote, this is disgusting, thought education, will supposedly compel Tibetans to voluntarily participate in the poverty elevation efforts prescribed by the state. That's what they're calling this, is poverty elevation. We're helping you not be poor by telling you what to think.
Yeah.
That is gross. Thought education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and
you can't educate someone on how to think. That is a gross violation of human rights.
Yeah, it certainly is. It really harkens back to the schools that we, in America, forced the assimilation schools that we forced Native Americans into for over 100 years.
It also sounds like the schools that children went to in Nazi Germany.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's why it's, believed by, a substantial sum that this has the potential to escalate into a genocide.
And that's why this is important to talk about. I mean, it took us a minute to get to this point, but like for the people who stick around, this is important. This is very bad. I mean, we can nip this in the bud if we're smart, but if we don't, this is bad.
Well, I think I sent you, an article that showed the satellite images of the hundreds of mosques and holy sites that are sacred to the Uyghurs,
tens of thousands
that have been destroyed in the last 3 years. 3 years.
I don't think a lot of people
these
know
things
that.
have been built over centuries. Well, they can't because journalists aren't allowed in. They aren't.
Also in Tibet, people have these labor plans explicitly include, transfer of Tibetan workers, and they have target quotas. Officials in Beijing have target quotas, and they're subject to punishment if they don't meet those quotas of Tibetan farmers that they move into these programs. I mean, that's another just layer to the cake that I found to be atrocious.
Yeah. No, hang on. I was given a recommendation. I don't want to be like my eyes going up and down. I'm getting some technical support. So quotas, said quotas. I mean, yeah, that's not surprising. Like you said earlier, the Communist Party is actively removing people from their homes and replacing them with like what many would call stooges, for lack of a better term. They're literally there to enforce the rules and eliminate culture. And yeah, if the Communist Party's agenda is nothing if not rational, or maybe not rational, but logical and calculated. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all that they have quotas for that kind of thing.
You brought up a great point earlier that we kind of grazed over, though, when you were talking about Native Americans and us doing a similar thing when we first colonized. And, I don't want to graze over that and, look as if we are one-sided with this issue of human right violation, where I'm fully aware, the US has made some horrible mistakes. Absolutely horrible. It still is to this day, making horrible mistakes. We're not blind to that. And I don't want any, future viewer to see us go over that point and think, wow, no, there are similarities to what we did to the natives and what is going on here.
Well, especially because those are the kinds of things that China uses in their like Twitter diplomacy to kind of draw attention away from their own current civil human rights abuses, is by pointing out current or historical misdeeds or atrocities that other countries have committed. And so it's
what adult would try that? That doesn't make it okay.
No adult would. That's why, especially like there's the spat with Australia and China has been called juvenile on a number of levels. Yeah, and it is. It's name calling. I think
it's more just showing Australian weak. It's showing weakness.
Yeah. Well, because I mean we're all supposed to be adults here, and when something that like that. So like it's almost unfairly it's wholly inappropriate for diplomacy, and when something like that happens, leaders have to really ignore it because it just makes the purveyor China look bad. But I really don't want to glaze over the Native American issue, because there are a lot of similarities in those ways. Like in addition to the initial taking of land, in the 1830s, we effectively like coerced a number of tribes to give up their homesteads, like the place where they had lived for hundreds if not thousands of years, and move to a completely different part of the country. The most famous example was the Trail of Tears, where the Cherokee were forced to march from Georgia to Oklahoma after the Supreme Court told the state of Georgia and the President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, that they could not. And President Jackson famously replied, "That is Justice Marshall's order. Now let him enforce it." And
we also gave him smallpox and blankets too. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah.
On that Trail of Tears.
There were, a quarter of the people who took that trip died. And even after that, when when the United States started expanding westward, we got to that point where we had forcibly resettled Native Americans,
but this was imposed a whole bunch of other. It's also important to remember, this was a different time. I'm not saying that makes it okay, but this was a more cruel, violent world that was back then. Things like World War II happened since then, and we came up with
things. It is in danger of happening again.
We came up with things like the Geneva Convention, and we came up with global guidelines to human rights. And that is a distinct difference between what happened almost 200, 300 years ago and what is happening right now.
I mean, personally, I don't think that the fact that it was a different time can excuse what we did to the Native Americans.
No excuse, for sure. No excuse. Don't mishear me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and because and I don't think that that's what you're doing, but it's a very common retort to like past bad acts, is that it was a different time, and in some cases that might mitigate the culpability. In most cases it's not, especially when it has to do with like subjugating other human beings.
Right. Things like the
So,
Geneva Convention, and we witnessed World War II and the genocides that happened there and the violation of human rights when it came to those that believed in, the Jewish faith. We've
mhm.
seen things happen and things go down a certain way, but history tends to repeat itself. It tends to be repetitive because we don't learn from it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, those lessons are learned.
this is a prime
They're bound
example
to be
right now of
repeated.
this happening again in Tibet.
Hmm. So I guess like a little bit of background on Tibet is that since roughly the 18th century, it's been generally accepted that Tibet is a part of China. Now, in 1913, Tibet actually declared independence, and it didn't really take internationally. It was still always, considered because it had been autonomous before that, and up until relatively recently, it had remained sort of autonomous. But in 1913, they declared independence, and between the civil war that occurred in China in the 1930s and World War II, where Japan occupied much of China in the early 40s, there wasn't really anybody going into Tibet to reimpose Chinese sovereignty, and that didn't happen until 1950 when the communist revolution had occurred, and they really like reimposed Chinese authority over Tibet, and it's really just sadly gone downhill from there.
People that speak out against the communist government in Tibet are being called separatists. And I think that
Yeah,
speaks to your whole spiel that you're spitting about, China not believing, but wanting people to believe that Tibet is still theirs because you can't separate from anything if you're not a part of it.
true. Yeah, yeah. No, that's all part of the image. We all use specific buzzwords to convey a particular image that we want to convey, and the Chinese propaganda machine is sophisticated, and they know what words to use. And so there have always been those in Tibet agitating for independence. They're so far away from the center of power in China that you know historically it has been easier for them to maintain autonomy, even if they haven't been able to get independence. But it's I agree that the use of the term separatists is meant to reaffirm what is already generally accepted, is that Tibet is a part of China. While that is that may not be the favored position of much of the world, they're that
You were also mentioning that the mosques, so mosques in the Muslim faith are trying to be wiped clean of China's borders. Inside of China, they don't want that religion because it speaks against the nationalism that is overtaking, most of China, the Communist Party's ideology. I mean, it's important to note, I think, too, that in Tibet, Buddhism is under attack
Mhm.
in the
It
same
has
in the
been
same
for
way.
decades.
Yeah.
So China is, I guess, a good preface is that it's important to understand how like we as Americans are like we do not recognize the blessing that we have in the First Amendment, where the free, like, we have free exercise of religion, and we have freedom from the imposition of religion. So it's one of the most like tolerant core clauses of any governing document worldwide. And the fact that houses of worship of any faith can be built and will not be wiped out by the government is a like like I don't want to say a privilege because it's a right, but it's it's a blessing that not all people have globally. And
Absolutely.
no place is that becoming more apparent than in Xinjiang and in Tibet.
Yeah, in Tibet, they're the authorities that are, loyal to the Communist Party and President Xing or Xi.
Xi.
Xi. All right,
President
President
Xi.
Xi. President Xi. So the authorities in Tibet that are loyal to President Xi, or they announced in 2017 plans to, put surveillance systems in Buddhist temples to, this is, and I quote, intelligent temple management. Just these words that they're using, like earlier they used, thought education. This all sounds very familiar. It's all sounding very much like what happened in the 1940s and what's been going on in North Korea.
Yeah, well, we know very little about North Korea. It's called the Hermit Kingdom for a reason, and it's all we really know is what we have been shown and what we can learn from defectors. So in that respect, like North Korea is far more closed off than any part of China. Even Xinjiang and Tibet, where visitors are heavily surveilled. There are a lot of places where they're just not allowed to go. The ruins of temples are some of those places. Back in the 80s, when China really started demolishing Tibetan holy sites, we didn't have the satellite imagery that we have today, that we've been able to monitor the erasure of Uyghur holy sites, over just the past 3 years. Reporters
Right.
back in the 80s, they had to rely on people who had been there, people who were allowed to make pilgrimages to those holy sites, mostly Indians, who also practice that part of the Buddhist faith, that school of Buddhist thought.
Right. This is all just a euphemism for control.
Yes, and I really like the word euphemism there, because there is one tack that China has taken that I think is more egregious than just about any other. Now, you're familiar with the Dalai Lama, yes?
Yes.
So the Dalai Lama is the leader of a school of Buddhist thought, who has been in self-imposed exile in India for many decades now. And according to that school of Buddhism, the Dalai Lama reincarnates. When one Dalai Lama dies, another is identified and approved by an individual who is called the Panchen Lama. And he is basically, it's kind of a crude comparison, but he's like the vice president to the Dalai Lama. He has the second highest amount of spiritual authority, which is probably a better way to say it. And in 1995, a 6-year-old boy was identified and approved by the Dalai Lama as the reincarnation of the last Panchen Lama. And within 3 days, that boy disappeared, as well as his family.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow. You know what? I think I heard about this. When was this?
The boy was taken in 1995. And it's still thought that he is alive and being kept in an undisclosed location, as well as his family and some other monks and other spiritual leaders. But the Dalai Lama is, well, actually, I should say this first. The Communist Party tried to offer up their own Panchen Lama, and he was rejected by the Tibetan people and by the Dalai Lama himself.
I mean, yeah.
Exactly. You can't just, you can't just, it doesn't work like that. And so, but when you look at the big picture and the core tenets of the Buddhist faith in this school, the Dalai Lama is getting up there, and the person who validates the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama is the Panchen Lama. And so by taking the the Panchen Lama, who was approved internally by the Dalai Lama himself, they tried to replace him with somebody who would down the line approve a Beijing friendly Dalai Lama that would essentially speed up their conversion and assimilation. It's a blatant assimilation tack. And nations have been calling for the release of the Panchen Lama for years now. He's 31 years old. There's no picture, like the only pictures of this person are him as a 6-year-old boy. And so like that's
crazy. That's such a cool culture though.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and that's like, I mean, I guess I can only speak for myself when I say that the more diversity of viewpoints and cultures that we have in this world, the more interesting it's going to be. And it is an outright atrocity when any culture is deliberately like dismantled or smothered like that. But just the ruthless, calculating tactic of like looking at how the school of Buddhism like regulates itself and trying to hijack their like what is their most sacred of processes, choosing like identifying the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama like that. It leaves you without words.
It makes you want to get more involved in this, like these sovereign nations, and there's got to be a way to make yourself more associated with a native tribe in America. That's something that'd be really cool to look into, and just to do what you can to revive and further their culture.
Mm-hmm. There are over 400 recognized Native American tribes in the United States. There are many more in Canada. But like some have reservations, some do not, but they are out there. Their culture is still alive, and they're like many of their languages are endangered. Like Western New York has one of the more robust Native American cultures. And,
out by you, yeah,
and I mean like 1%. Like it doesn't sound like much, but 1% of Buffalo is Native American, and unfortunately, that is one of the top 10 highest percentages of Native ethnicity in cities in the United States. The Seneca Nation is one of the few that actually owns the land on which they sit. Is for, again, lack of a better term, most Native American reservations are set aside by the federal government in trust for a certain tribe. So
people just go to reservations for tobacco. They don't really know a whole lot about them.
Yeah, you would. I mean, I guess that's where education comes in. Diversity of viewpoint, diversity again. And I'm guilty of the same thing. When I was young, we went out to the Tonawanda band of Seneca Nation. That was the one closest to us. We went out there to get tobacco and cheaper gas, and it really is kind of a shame that we didn't take it upon ourselves at that time to learn a little more about them. But it's not over. There's still plenty that we can do to.
I'm just trying to imagine like a recognized Dalai Lama that we hear about in the news that's making, religious decisions for a group of people that relate to current events. it's such a tragedy that we don't have that because he's locked away.
Well, the Dalai Lama himself is not locked away. Self-imposed exile just means that he left Tibet on his own because he would have been locked away. He's been a free man in India for a long time.
His family. Oh wait, so they all left. They're not locked up.
No.
Okay.
And the Dalai Lama, Aunt Laura saw him speak at Syracuse a few years ago. I don't know if he still travels because he's getting into his 90s, but
your aunt saw him?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, no, she loved it. He's
in exile, so he's not okay. So I misheard you earlier. I was under the impression that he was locked away somewhere under the Communist Party's.
No.
Okay.
And that's why it's so egregious that the Panchen Lama has been taken, because the Dalai Lama is a free man, and the
pension Lama is locked up.
Yes, the second. I feel like I'm not doing the faith justice by saying second in command, but he holds a particular place in that religion.
And the Panchen Lama recognizes the next Dalai Lama.
Panchen, yeah.
Panchen Lama.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He recognizes the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. Like right now, the current Dalai Lama is considered the 14th Dalai Lama. When he passes, a 15th Dalai Lama will be identified, or maybe not, because recently the Dalai Lama has said that maybe he won't reincarnate, because that would just be playing into the literal trap that the Communist Party has set, and so I mean, in his mind, maybe it is better to.
Is he seen as a prophet in Tibet, or he's just a spiritual he's a religious figurehead?
I don't know exactly. He is certainly the spiritual leader of that faith. I don't know. I don't know enough about it to say that he is a prophet. He's certainly not a figurehead. He is an active leader.
I didn't mean that in a bad way at all. No.
Oh no, and it's not always. It's not always.
We're getting a little bit of feedback from your mic. I think it's hitting the table again. Yeah.
Like Queen Elizabeth is a figurehead, but
right.
She doesn't. People don't pretend that she has real power, but the Pope, for example, is not a figurehead, and neither is the Dalai Lama. It's not necessarily a derogatory connotation, but it just doesn't it certainly wouldn't
do it justice.
Exactly.
Right.
So the Dalai Lama understands that the Chinese, the Communist Party, is waiting for him to expire in India, and they think that they're going to be able to, I guess, further assimilate the Tibetan people without their spiritual leader, being around, and without a successor being chosen in the official way. And so it just to me it demonstrates
it's quite the power play.
It's a huge power. It's a gross power play, and it's really quite despicable. And that was even before Xi, President Xi came to power. This happened in 1995, I believe. Mao Zedong was still the president of the Communist Party at that point, but I would have to double check that. But I guess just to say a final thing about the Dalai Lama is that the amount of courage and the type of the difficult decision that he's considering making to not reincarnate in order to.
Is that a decision he can make?
Apparently, yeah. I have not studied the texts. I'm not a student.
Imagine an Avatar: The Last Airbender type. I'm not going to reincarnate. I'm just going to cut the cycle.
Well, I mean, instead, I guess the choice as he sees it is, let his faith be hijacked by a completely malevolent actor, or let it end on his, I guess not necessarily end, but let this portion end on his terms, not anybody else's. So,
And those are the only two outcomes unless intervention takes place.
Perhaps. I mean, we don't know for sure if the Panchen Lama is still alive. Like I said, it's believed that he is, but we don't know that as a matter of fact. So
that's so interesting. I didn't know about any of this. That's really crazy. Just like that whole little bit about that culture, I had no clue about.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and it shows you the great lengths that, like, it's also a warning in my mind. It shows you the great lengths that China is willing to go to reach its goals, like that they really will stop at nothing. So I guess that's kind of why we're talking about all this, because there are a lot of fronts where they are escalating their aggression, and and world leaders have a number of very difficult decisions ahead of them about how to handle China's rise in the Communist Party.
So this whole idea of control that I'm looking into, it's not new. I mean, even back in 1989, according to this article, a Chinese anthropologist, I think this is very important to mention, because what the Chinese Communist Party has done is taken this genius of an anthropologist, Fei Xiaotong, is that his name? Xiaotong? Fei Xiaotong.
I would say Fei Xiaotong.
Fei Xiaotong.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I had to guess.
Fei Xiaotong. This is a very difficult language.
Yeah. Mandarin is one of the hardest languages to learn. That's why you'll see a lot of forms that that get sent out, especially about the state of New York. They have traditional Mandarin and then simplified Mandarin below it.
Yeah.
It's very
So
complicated.
Fei Xiaotong, who is a brilliant Chinese anthropologist, he predicted the mixing and melding, kind of like the melting pot of the U.S., but in China, to create a Chinese nation race. But he saw it happening more naturally, where the Chinese Communist Party, it seems, has taken this ideology from this anthropologist and has said, okay, we're going to achieve this, but for our benefit, for the power of the Communist Party that we want to build, and we're going to not let it happen naturally, but we're going to force it.
Yeah.
Because with this many cultures, I mean, there's certain theories out there about the globe and all the different diversities that we have in color of skin and different types of religion and ethnicities. There are theories out there that eventually we will all become one race, just from mixing, kind of like we have in the U.S., but on a larger scale, if we don't kill ourselves first. So there's this whole idea that we'll become one race and one religion, maybe not one religion, but one race. And so there's proposals like this on a global scale, but this specific anthropologist sees this happening in China. He calls it the Chinese nation race, happening naturally. But the Communist Party and President Xi seems to have done this. Did I say that right? President Xi?
President Xi, yeah.
President Xi. President Xi seems to be kind of forcing it.
Yeah, I would say that more or less. He just got impatient.
Or he saw an opportunity to build his power and control, almost in a similar way that Hitler saw the fall of Germany and saw the opportunity to turn them into a world dominating force.
Well, the the dynamics that happened between World War I and World War II in Germany were complicated, and I mean, not that dissimilar to the to President Trump's attempt to overturn this election by just, you know, claiming rampant voter fraud and doing whatever he can to undermine the system. There was a lot of that going on in Germany at the time that World War I ended as well. But I mean, I guess that's a topic for another day. But I mean, President Xi is in an odd position in the world, and it's not odd by virtue of him being the only one doing it. It's odd by the almost embarrassing transparency with which he is trying to make a case to rule for life. You know, and we've seen this in Russia, where President Putin had the push through a constitutional amendment that will allow him to stay in power until 2036. President or how do you say that? You know, I think it is Prime Minister Recep Erdogan, who changed the Turkish laws to allow him to rule for much longer. Viktor Orban in Hungary has done something similar, but President Xi is in the second of 2 5-year terms, and he's currently building a case that will convince the other higher ups in the Communist Party, of which there are few. I mean, there are thousands of members of the Communist Party, but the legislature is really just a rubber stamp. Power is concentrated at the very top. Most of it with President Xi, but there are others who call a lot of shots up there as well. And he's trying to convince them to allow him to rule for life. That is what he's trying to do right now. And so a lot of these power plays that he's making are in service of that goal. So,
but the power and support that he gets from his country will only grow with these pet projects that he has, like poverty alleviation, where it's really just a cover for reshaping the livelihood of his citizens, their families, their culture, religion, languages. They're completely eliminating certain languages from their country. They're saying, we're not going to teach this anymore. We're only going to teach Mandarin.
Or worse, we're not going to allow this to be taught.
Right. This is not going to be taught at this university anymore. And that is if he's going to find a way to achieve a longer abuse of power, the best way to do that is to gain his support and love. And I mean, that may not be the case with everyone, but you know, it's kind of the same as in Russia, or even in the US during the Cold War, when we were conforming because we didn't want to look like a communist. You know, and there's that fear for your family, like you said earlier. There's that fear for your success in life. You don't want to be unsuccessful if you stand out against something in your country that is not right. I mean, people are getting blacklisted in the US right now for ridiculous reasons. And I mean, it makes sense. It's a smart, terrible, evil thing, but it makes sense. And it's working.
Yeah, it is working, because when you look at the ethnic breakdown of China and where those ethnicities are dispersed, it's centralized among the Han, who are the majority ethnic group in China. And then when you look at the other groups that are like, let's just refer to the ones that are, you know, being like publicly abused by the Communist Party. You know, you have the Mongolians in the far north of the country. You have the Uyghurs in the northwest, the Tibetans in the southwest, and you know, these ethnic groups are scattered around, you know, the perimeter of the Chinese border, and you know, they don't have all that much in common. So the chances of them banding together and rising up to fight oppression are slim to none. So, China can reach its tentacles into, each area that it wants to, to really change, manipulate, revise,
especially
and
especially when you have the surveillance that we started this podcast off with. We were
mhm,
getting into this whole idea of facial recognition, but it doesn't stop there. They've attempted to obtain and have successfully obtained um, documents on American citizens from health insurance paychecks. I'm pretty sure, right?
yeah,
Wasn't
yeah,
paychecks also hacked by the Chinese? And people say it's just my paycheck. What's the big deal? The big deal is intelligence is a weapon. That's one thing I've learned
mhm,
from being in the military. Intelligence is a weapon, and wars are won on intelligence. So if they're building a conglomerate, you know, bulk of information, and they're going to use our American technology to sift through that information, because we were giving them, as we said earlier, our technology to do with what they please with that company, but that company is controlled by the Communist Party. So they're going to use our information to sift through that bulk information for what they need. So if they have detailed files showing income of employment statuses on people in Tibet, which they do, state-approved solution for that situation, you know, it, and people are easier to control when you take them away from their family, which is what they're doing. They're taking the men who primarily work, bringing into an urban, workshop type area where they are doing military drills, probably prepping
mhm,
them for a war if they need to just throw
yeah,
the way they did with North Korea when they threw, what was it, a million just Chinese soldiers at us at the
quite a
very
few,
end and pushed us back
yeah,
to the 38th parallel. Like
hmm
they're prepping and leaving your kids behind in Tibet. And what are they doing? They're growing up in boarding schools where they're
yeah,
learning the same thing because they don't have their father there to tell them otherwise. And then they
which
have
is
this.
actually it's exactly what we did to Native Americans.
Yep.
But so yeah,
So
no, it's not
shame
like
on
we're
us.
claiming right, but now we know, like it's like we have that I guess that's the thing. Like there is no silver lining to that situation, but
Right. Shame on us, but we know what they're doing.
right, it's learning from your mistakes and being able to recognize it in other areas.
And
You
it's
know,
like I said, it's a terrible thing that we did, but we weren't doing this well, I guess we were doing it to spread our influence.
yeah,
Looking
no,
back on it, we were.
yes, completely, completely. The same poverty alleviation theoretical framework was used on Native Americans as recently as the 1950s. Like these schools didn't close down all that long ago, and there was a an endeavor that went on in Oklahoma called the Dawes Commission, where like Dawes was a well-meaning individual, but he did what he did in I believe wholeheartedly because he thought it was in the best interests of native populations, but he was dead wrong, and it was a terrible thing that he did, and part of that was um, cutting up their land and divvying it up to individuals rather than collectively owned by the tribe, which was how Native American tribes had viewed ownership and property for thousands of years. They took their kids, brought them into schools that forbid the teaching of their languages, and tried to indoctrinate them with Christianity. And that's the exact same things are happening in the internment camps in Shanxing, and with the replacement that is going on in Tibet as well. And it's hard to understate just how like dire poverty alleviation is to like selling that to the Chinese populace, because you're not like Tibet's a hard place to get to, and not very many Chinese citizens are really going to make it there over the
It's in the
course of their
Himalayas,
lives.
right?
Yeah, it's way up there. It's pretty sparsely populated. I don't know exactly how many people live up there, but I don't think it's more than 5 million, like in the whole region. It's
Wow.
pretty large. difficult living, but that's where they've lived for thousands of years. And so it might sound good to, teach them new skills in urban settings and teach them, military tactics and, but they aren't poor. They may not have material, like the same like material value that that the Communist Party is trying to like force them into that economy. They make their living off of hurting. Many of them, that is what they've done for thousands of years.
Right. This is their ancient. This is ancient what they do. This is who they are.
Yeah.
They're the equivalent of Native Americans in the U.S.
Yeah. At least in a I think it's slightly more like the tactics are the same, but I think
as far as being a sovereign nation.
Yes.
Moving on to the Islamic faith in this northeastern part of China.
Yeah, northwestern. They're up in the
western. Right, my bad. Domes and minarets. Is that what they're called? Minarets.
Mm-hmm. Minarets. It's Islamic architecture.
So domes and minarets have been in crescent moons have been deemed un-Chinese.
Yeah, and like there's a few layers of. It's hard to find the right word because it's less hatred, more of. There's a few layers of, I guess, of disrespect in that, because China, it's not like China has its own religion that it's trying to impose on ethnic minorities. They are actively attempting to eradicate religion altogether. Like in my opinion, secular societies are required for at least for a functioning nation to work, because it's very rare, if not impossible, that every citizen or every occupant, every person present in a given country is going to subscribe to the same religious beliefs. And those beliefs of minorities need to be protected, because if they're not protected, it's a recipe for oppression. An interesting example is the nation of Pakistan, where they are still they're a secular society, but they are still an Islamic republic. And I guess what that means is that they're like the 96% of their population who practices Islam or identifies as Muslim, they believe that their government can work where Islam is the official religion, but they allow other ethnic minorities to practice their religion. In China, that doesn't exist. Religions of all kinds are persecuted. Buddhists and Islam.
Yeah, that's what we seem to be gathering from this research.
Heavily, but Christianity is persecuted heavily in China as well. So, but yeah, back to how they treat the Uyghurs and their practicing Muslim faith. They the symbols. Symbols are obviously like an important part of any religion. They're sacred. They give people a sense of identity, and the Chinese, the Communist Party is in the active process of trying to remove that identity, and in the meantime, dismantling shrines, mosques, other sacred markers, that some of which have been standing for hundreds of years.
Yeah, there's so much to this religion, and religion in general. Each religion has, significant, specific things that are personable to that religion. But this one in particular, these posts that surround the mosques where they tie prayerful messages to them, and they kind of wave as flags. Thousands of people to each mosque out there that's been destroyed, which at this point has been thousands. And when we say destroyed, like you were saying earlier, they're erased. They're gone.
Yeah.
There's satellite imagery. And I'm going to pull one up on the screen as we talk. But there's a satellite image of it in one year where it is standing and people praying, and then it's gone, like completely eliminated. And thousands of people used to flock to these things and pray and take these pilgrimages.
Right.
And now they're gone. They're just not there.
Yeah, and not just Uyghurs, people from other Central Asian nations would cross into China and make the trip to these sacred sites, because like one of the five pillars of Islam is the Hajj, which is a pilgrimage. And it's my understanding that the literal Hajj is a pilgrimage to Mecca that all Muslims are maybe not obligated, but strongly encouraged, at least. I mean, again, I'm not an expert in the area, to make the pilgrimage to at least once in their life. But there are other sacred sites where similar pilgrimages are common practice, and there are, as there are there are a variety of schools of Islamic thought as well, just like Buddhism and Christianity. It's not a one size fits all. It varies on culture and geography and
this is more than a pilgrimage, though. What was going on in this region of China? There was performers, games, food, storytelling. It was a festival.
Festivals.
Yeah. So this was a culture. This was a way of living that's being eliminated.
And if we do not intercede, that will be erased with it. It could be erased within a generation. And one of the most deficient areas of the Trump administration China policy was its single-minded focus on economic.
But okay, we were talking about it being a festival, a way of life.
Yeah, and without like the physical destruction of these sites is one thing, but it's not like they have the Uyghurs, that is. It's not like they have the means and the permissions, it pains me to say, to rebuild those sites, even though when journalists from the West and other foreign visitors come in and visit the region, they will see some ruins, and they've the Communist Party has been making claims since they did this to Buddhist temples back in the 80s, that they were going to be rebuilt in the next few years, and that just has never happened. So if there is no intervention, then it's very possible that these festivals, this way of life that has stood the test of time, will be erased within a generation. And that was what it is. It's and I mean, we, like you and I, are not alone in that assumption. One of the most, well, actually, I'll start with UNESCO. UNESCO is the United Nations cultural heritage arm, and it, I'm not sure if China is party to the treaty, but I think they are. But anyway, long story short, destroying cultural landmarks is a war crime. Plain and simple.
Right. Yeah. As I would imagine.
Well, if you recall, when tensions got high between the United States and Iran back in late 2019, January 2020, President Trump said that he was going to target Iranian cultural monuments, and the backlash was intense. His own generals said, "No, Mr. President, that's a war crime.
You can't do that.
You can't do that." I think John Kelly was out by then, but But anyway, what China is doing is a war crime. It's a crime against humanity
And
because they are cultural
mosques
genocide.
are being converted into bars, markets, delis, convenience stores. I mean, imagine that happening to a church in the United States.
Well, with the caveat that sometimes sometimes churches are abandoned or foreclosed upon and converted into housing and stuff like that. But the difference between a lot of these cultural sites and the, churches converted to housing, if the Catholic Church stepped in and told a municipality, we don't want this repurposed, I'm willing to bet that the municipality would respect their wishes, for one. And yep, I lost the second one, so maybe I'll come up with it, but it'll have to be.
We're talking about a lot of stuff,
in.
man. There's no shame in that.
Yeah.
You are a one-man think tank. I'll just put it that way.
They've been on my LinkedIn recently.
Who's they?
Think tanks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I don't do much on LinkedIn actually. I mean, technically, I haven't even listed my current employment on there, what I've been doing for the past year. I don't know. I guess when I have another job, I'll just fill in the blanks as I go. I just not really that into social media, but I do see who views my profile and whatnot, because that gives me insight into who's what types of employers are interested in my skills.
What type of attention you're creating too.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was in I don't know, did you see the Buffalo Rising article that
No.
All right, I'll send that to you later. But yeah, they interviewed me and my councilman, and
did you?
They featured me more heavily than I expected. So I'll send that to you.
So you got a little bit of clout in Buffalo now, huh?
I wouldn't put it that way.
For the people who read the news.
Dude, believe it or not, the Buffalo News reaches through paper or through electronic means, they reach roughly 75%, 7 to 8 out of every 10 Buffalonians, or even more
Really?
People in Western New York. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. People read the news, and whether a lot of the times nowadays they're finding articles that are shared on Facebook, but still, there are still a lot of people that subscribe.
This is the beginning of the climb right here. This is the beginning of the climb. This is your first big interview of many. I'm calling it.
One can only hope.
Yeah.
So, but I really do want to get that other comparison back into my head about.
This is so what we're observing on a grand scale for religion and culture in China is just eradication. And I mean, would you agree?
Yeah.
And mosques are being demolished. Burial sites are being demolished. I think I read that too. It's very sad.
All sorts of cultural, if in China's mind, they really have two choices. If their authoritarian method of government is going to work, they need to cut those regions loose, or they need to assimilate them. And it's just not within China's playbook or worldview to just let them go. So they're going to keep pushing until they've been beaten, or until most or all traces of those cultures are erased, sadly.
It's incredible to me how differently China can view history, though. Even with the Korean War, they have an entirely different name for it. They call it the war to resist U.S. aggression and aid Korea.
Yeah. I mean, as far as foreign conflicts are concerned, we all do that. Look at the divisiveness over here. Like people are disputing facts, not just like how those facts are interpreted, but the facts themselves. What's true and what's not. So as far as conflicts are concerned, this stuff happens on a global scale. Like Poland recently passed a law that criminalized certain speech regarding the Holocaust that is intended to reduce their own culpability and complicity in the genocide. Trying to think of another example here. Turkey still denies that the Armenian genocide happened at all. That's like that. I mean, the Armenian genocide was the first recognized genocide of the 20th century, and they just don't admit that it ever happened. So, that's a pretty common thing to try to. I mean, because they're trying to boost their own ambitions now, and they don't want the past to hamper them. Especially if those actions were taken by somebody else. They it's shameful, but they'll twist and bend the truth to their agenda. It's something that China does, and it's something that they do aggressively, but they are not alone in that tactic.
No, we do it just as much, and we've seen more of it as the last year's events have played out. But it doesn't help when we have hypocrites. I mean, I'm sure you know what I'm about to bring up. Governor Newsom going out to dinner.
Do as I say, not as I dine.
No mask, indoors, with people of different households. Completely for the strict mandates he's been putting out for his state. That was just a embarrassment to see him out there like that.
Complete embarrassment. I joke with my dad that there's a rotating dunce cap of hypocrisy that passes from Chuck Schumer to President Trump to Mitch McConnell to Nancy Pelosi, and
at least he apologized.
Yeah,
I mean, at least he put out an apology. He's better than Nancy, who said I was set up going to a hair salon. Get out of here.
Yeah, no, she was intransigent about that. Mitch McConnell just I feel like he's just kind of steered into the skid of his own hypocrisy. He doesn't care what people think about him, But the whole Supreme, the whole confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett. Was he couldn't even wait until the lame duck session. That's, and especially after all that happened, in 2016, I'm not going to weigh in on the merits of actually confirming the justice, in one situation, but not another, but it certainly reeks of hypocrisy. Whichever way you look at it.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. They're all goons. But so I feel like we've covered a lot of great topics here with China. There's one that we haven't touched yet, Hong Kong. I'd like to dive into that with you and maybe help me, because that's actually a part I don't really know a whole lot about. Could you tell me more about what went down in Hong Kong? I understand there was a young couple in a relationship, and where he decided to kill her had some sort of tied to some sort of issue of where to prosecute him, whether in China or Hong Kong, and that's what sparked this whole debut of this progressive control over Hong Kong.
Progressive, regressive.
Yeah.
So a little bit of background first. Hong Kong, up until almost the turn of the century, was a British city-state. It was if you look at a map, it's it looks like you could hit mainland China with a rock from Hong Kong, but it was owned by the the United Kingdom until 1998, when they struck an agreement with China to maintain what's been called one country, two systems. So Hong Kong was given over to China on the condition that Hong Kong be able to retain
its own independence until, what was it, 2074?
2047 or 48.
47, I had backwards, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of dates in there. But it was less, like Hong Kong wasn't independent, but it was autonomous. Like, remember, we've been discussing parts of nations that govern themselves and like are part of another country, but they have their own system of government and their own set of rules. So this was the case in Hong Kong, and the ability for it to be, right on the edge of China, while retaining its like special trade statuses with all of the Western countries, having, not entirely free trade, but it was substantially easier to trade through Hong Kong than it was to trade through China. And that was because they had an independent judiciary, and they like ran their city by common law and democratic principles. And that's what permitted it to retain its special trade status for so long, because countries could depend on doing business with Hong Kong and having it not be meddled with by Beijing and the Communist Party, at least to an extent where it would significantly hamper investment. And that allowed Hong Kong to be one of the most prosperous cities on earth. It, like, I've never been, but it's like I have heard that it is a truly unique and remarkable place. So the thought, I guess the running theory of what was going to happen with Hong Kong is that they knew that China was going to try to pressure it, from 1998 to 2048. But the theory was that it was going to be a slow change, where in 1998, Hong Kong looked like Great Britain, and ever so gradually, it would look more and more like mainland China until it was eventually indistinguishable.
But part of our whole, I shouldn't say our, but when I say our, I mean the UN, when it comes to, the UK, part of the UK's whole grab for that, extending that, okay, they're going to remain autonomous, and two what was it you said?
One country, two systems.
One country, two systems. That whole it was a part of that to give them enough time to want independence at that point and somehow achieve it, or was that an attempt to spread democracy, or was that a financial gain on their part?
I can't know for sure. I'm going to lean toward financial gain, because remember that we discussed at the very beginning that Western powers, ever since China was opened in 1979, have been trying to work with China instead of against it. And I think it's most likely that Britain was kind of reducing its imperial presence in the world, and the people of Hong Kong are more like culturally similar to the people of China, certainly that more than they are to the the people of Britain. But I think it was more of a like something to like a carrot, really, to an agreement with China to encourage it to play by more democratic rules. So yeah, in some sense they were trying to spread democracy, but they weren't trying to like give Hong Kong time to mobilize and, you know, have their own like revolution or secession, because that was never going to happen.
But fast forward to now, and you have pro-democracy movement leaders being sentenced to prison for over a year for unlawful assembly at the Hong Kong police headquarters. So what happened?
So a few years ago, you were talking about you know, a man and his girlfriend. They live in Hong Kong. They take a trip over to mainland China, and so at some point during that trip, it's widely believed that he killed her. And because like the I guess the what went into the mainstream media was surveillance footage of them arriving together and him coming back alone. And so this girl's family, this woman's family, was understandably, you know, distraught, devastated. You know, they want justice, but Hong Kong in mainland China did not have an extradition treaty as you know, as part of the agreement that was made with Great Britain back in the late 90s. And so China and Hong Kong's pro-China government delegation led by Carrie Lam tried to change that law to allow China to to allow for an extradition treaty. And it was the perfect excuse, the perfect a very sympathetic excuse. You know, there's nothing to detract from, you know, the atrocity of a murder like that, but Hong Kongers, especially like the pro-democracy faction, was terrified, and rightly so, that if such a treaty were imposed, that the mainland would start sending people over and abducting people off the streets, which has like that's a tactic that
Not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever.
Well, it's not just out of the realm of possibility. It was very likely to begin happening.
Extremely, yeah.
Because that's I guess, like, you know, they say actions speak louder than words, right? And the Communist Party has a track record of such public abductions.
And so what are we looking at right now as far as protests and unrest in Hong Kong due to these pro-democracy tensions?
As soon as Carrie Lam and the Hong Kong government tried to change the law to allow for extradition, protests erupted throughout the city. They shut down the airport. They closed many main modes of transit. They clogged streets. They had parades. They held massive protests, some of which became violent. And eventually, the Hong Kong government walked back their law proposal. But then the cat was really out of the bag. And as soon as the coronavirus turned from a central China issue to a global pandemic, China pounced. And they took the opportunity.
Hey, baby.
This one's Mittens.
Oh,
so
that's who?
Got the Mittens.
Mittens.
The foot with 18 toes on it.
18 toes?
Not really, but I think she's got 7 on each paw. Each of the.
We're entering back into crazy cat realm. Just giving you a vibe check.
Yeah. No,
I got a cat with 18 toes.
They check it every so often. But so while the rest of the world was trying to fight the coronavirus in their own populations, China threw their surveillance state into high gear, and, you know, basically they closed everything down. They did not let anybody in, inspectors or otherwise, and they like the restrictions that they imposed on their people in like the first like few months of the COVID-19 pandemic, where like I can't find the right word to describe like how startling it is, but they really crack down, and whether or not they actually have the pandemic under control, the information is not getting out. So anyway, while other nations were dealing with the pandemic at home, China took the opportunity to crack down on Hong Kong, and they started sending police in to crack down on the protests. They passed a national security law at the end of June, which created vague violations, criminal violations. I think the words were like secession and I think insurrection was one of them, but anyway, it was really broad term, and they didn't define them at all. And so, and that was kind of the point, because they wanted the people of Hong Kong to live in fear of of further protests. They were trying to
Right.
shut it down,
discourage from further deviance from what they wanted.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, yeah.
And was it nipped in the bud, or are there still protests going on right now? Is there still some sort of movement for pro-democracy in Hong Kong?
Well, there's still a movement for pro-democracy, but it's muted.
Yeah.
And like only
this is another area where you were talking about China extending its tentacle, as you put it earlier.
Yeah.
And taking like land grabs and spreading their Chinese, or one Chinese race and nationalist ideology that the Chinese Communist Party wants to extend to all these areas.
Yeah, and Hong Kong is a key one, because and also I don't know if Hong Kong does like the most trade in the region, or if they are like the wealthiest city in the region.
Huge
but
hub,
it's
though.
Certainly up there. It's
well known
huge.
for that. Yeah.
And it's like it's a city unlike any other. Like I've already been gushing about, but it's like it's a lot like Singapore in a lot of ways. Another city state that I've never been to, that I am espousing the virtues of. But anyway, it's like it just holds such a special status globally, and it and like China bringing it under the direct authority of the Communist Party it's just another front on which China is trying to expand its influence, like you're saying.
You were also talking last time we went on the podcast at your house about Africa and how there's a new Iron Curtain falling over the states. I'm sorry, not the states, the countries bordering China, the Chinese region in Africa, how they're being bought out from poverty and industrialized with the Chinese dollar and falling into debt with the Communist Party.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to. Yeah, no, definitely happy to talk. Well, we might want to. Africa is less oppression than it is economic power plays, and so that might be better for like a part 2 when we talk about like.
Yeah, I'd be about that.
Yeah. Well, just because like Africa is like they've been investing heavily in Africa, and like, but they haven't been like violating civil rights, trying to fucking annex it.
Yeah, if we feel like we're starting to slow down here, we can call it. I mean, we've got some great content.
Well, I'm looking for the specific name of a parable that describe, or that the Chinese used to describe the Hong Kong situation, and
because you have a great intellect about you that just really puts things in a great way for people to understand. And
try my best.
you know, your encouragement for me to do my research and make my stuff more dependable and reliable when it comes to sources. And all our sources, everything we've used today is going to be available in the description of wherever you're going to be listening to this. All of our sources are going to be documented. This is all real. Okay, we're not making stuff up.
Yeah, you can fact check us.
Fact check it, please do. And yeah, leave challenge it. I invite challenge, because that's what this country was founded on, was challenge and opposing views. So
I'm reading that over 50 Pennsylvania state lawmakers have actually signed their names to a letter that urging the Pennsylvania congressional delegation to challenge Biden's Pennsylvania victory, even though he won by like 60,000 or 80,000 votes, and they certified his win. So
really, well, why would 50 legislators do that if there wasn't some sort of tangible evidence?
Well, I mean, I think, like, as we've seen nationwide, there doesn't need to be evidence for people to follow Trump off a cliff. So
I guess that's true. Yeah, there are those types out there.
And there are those types on the other side too. There are some people who would follow AOC off a cliff, like, regardless of what she said, but it's astounding to me that 50 still, like, I know, like, I'm a broken record at this point, but
it's a big number. Yeah,
50 legislators, 50 people who got elected to state, like, to state office, have signed a letter, like, urging basically trying to undermine the will of the people.
Well, they must have heard something. I mean, we'll have to wait for the next few days for that to come out.
Well, they heard plenty. Like, Rudy Giuliani has been pushing this, like, peddling this stuff around, and I mean, Trump's Twitter feed has been, the main source of all this nonsense. There's no evidence. There's no evidence, and every judge in every court case that they have thrown in there, they've been laughed out of the courtroom. Right. So it's like, at this point, it's just like undermining. It's undermining the election. That's all it is. And we can, like, that. It kind of goes back to, like, what I was starting to talk about with Germany at the end of World War I, and the sort of, like, blatant knife in the back, like, fact revision or fact creation that just tries to keep their narrative on point. And it's just, I don't know, it's just something I was surprised to see. If anything, it'll just delay the ultimate victory for President-elect Biden. But
wheels of justice, like you said.
I mean, at this point, it's democracy. Like, yeah, technically he has a right to file all the lawsuits and challenges he wants, but at what point are you, like, you swore an oath to uphold the laws of the nation, and by trying to find every loophole, valid or not, you're just undermining the American project, which should be a slap in the face to everybody who's ever served in our military, to everyone who's ever like, worked a civil service job, to everybody who's held public office, to everybody who, like, considers himself an American. It's it's not right. It's not right. You know, like
Right.
if there were some facts, you know, maybe. But
There are. I think we need to wait and just see what comes up in the next few days. Because if something like that was signed, there must be something that we haven't been privy to yet. If not, then I agree with you. That is a little outlandish. Like you said, it's not going to make much of a difference unless there's something.
because it won't take, like, he already has enough electoral votes anyway. He doesn't need
Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
He doesn't need it. Yeah.
But
There was something
yeah.
about Georgia the other day too, about ballots
Yeah.
leaving in a suitcase. Have you not heard that?
I stopped looking at
I don't know much about it either. But
conspiracy theories last week. You know, the only election that I'm still following is the congressional. I think it's congressional district 2022. Something. It's in central New York, basically from Oswego to Binghamton. You know, Anthony Brindisi is the incumbent. Claudia Tenney is the you know, the challenger. She once held the office as well. But like that race was down to about 12 votes, and
wow, 12.
Like, yeah, 12.
That's crazy.
And there have been some irregularities that are, I mean, that aren't, they don't seem like malevolent to me. They don't seem malicious, and they're probably going to end up benefiting the Republican candidate in the end. But like, that it's a mess. It's a mess. There's 8 counties, and they did it 8 different ways. Just kind of like harks back to a lower stakes version of Bush v. Gore. Which,
one thing I will say about the Trump administration and Mike Pompeo is China is one area where they have been performing, and they've been going about the proper strategy of doing so. I think that Biden will be a bit more low key and not have the characteristics that Trump does, that he is loud about it and provocative and provocateur, but
yeah,
they have done a good job.
Well,
especially,
I agree that
yeah,
like confrontation with China needed to happen, but they didn't do enough. Like they focused solely on the economic issues, the trade issues, the like intellectual property.
That's where I'm giving a pat on the back. But the other things that we talked about, I'm not seeing much.
Well, in fact, it went the other direction. He like congratulated Xi on his Hong Kong crackdown, and he told him to keep interning Uyghurs and to continue oppressing them.
He said this?
Like, yes. Like,
where did he say this?
According to John Bolton, who was his national security advisor.
I don't know. I'll have to look that one up, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I wasn't in the room, and you know, we can always you know, dispute what you know, former administration officials have to say, but like John Bolton has been a dyed-in-the-wool conservative, a hawk in foreign policy matters for years, and you know, like it's not like anyone would really be that surprised if Trump did say something like that, because his human rights record is atrocious. I mean,
yeah, right. I'm thinking, what's a great way to wrap up?
Not make too many logical leaps. So it's just summing it up as objectively as possible.
Right. You know what? I think we'll stop it there then. I think we did a good job. We got some good content.
Oh, so no parable.
I don't know if we need one. Where I haven't done a lot of reading on the upcoming articles that we're going to get into.
Yeah, the trade ones. Okay.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
and we can wrap trade in with an economic talk about China.
Yeah, because Hong Kong is a big part of that. You know, and
the Caribbean and Africa and.
Forgot about the Caribbean.
We have the material to do a part 2, so why don't we do that?
Yeah,
All
for
right.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eric, Jeffrey,
whatever
Michaels.
Comes up, it comes up. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it ever so much. I know the people that are going to be watching this are going to appreciate your take and your intellect. So please be safe. I hope you guys get through all these COVID tests and get back out into the world pretty soon. Till then, stay safe.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, really nice to be here, and it's a topic that people need to know about. So let's keep it going.
Hell yeah. We're good.
Cool. That shit's getting cut, dude.
Maybe we'll put it at the end. It's like a blooper.
Yeah, no, the highlight reels.
Oh my god. Something on fire at your end?
I'm telling you, dude, when I'm president, I'm gonna get mocked so heavily for the size of my eyeballs.
E.T. looking motherfucker.
Seriously. Look at this. Come on. I have to gain some weight or else.
You've got the hand too, man.
Dude, you don't know what my high school experience was like.
Yeah.
Yo,
people call you E.T.
Yeah, like the older kids used to they used to bug me into doing that. Like they like the
Are you serious? They would make you do that? That's so humiliating.
Well, I mean, it wasn't like quite to the level of hazing. It was more like shaming peer pressure.
Dude, I've heard of people getting made fun of and called some funny names. I have never heard of someone being called E.T.
Well, I mean, my first initial is an E, and when you have fingers like this, yeah, no, it was.
Oh my god, I'm crying.
A little too easy. So was I.
I'm laughing at your pain. I hope that's okay. Don't worry, I got picked on too.
We like, it's been a while since you were 12 years old. We haven't forgotten.
I don't think you recall my my middle school rap career.
More like the unhealthy obsession with fairness.
True. Well, I have a stepdad to thank for that.
Right.
Dick.
Yeah, we won't get into that.
No. I don't think people need to know how long we've known each other either. Jesus.